He stood in the quiet corner of the church, adjusting his cufflinks like this was just another business deal. Then Daniel looked straight at me, cold certain, and said, "The greatest gift for our wedding is if you disappear from our family." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because I was shocked, but because I realized he truly believed I would quietly step aside. So I smiled. And the next morning, I was gone. Not just from the wedding, from everything they thought they could control. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong in your own family, I'd love to hear your story. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if this story touches something in your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. My name is Katherine Hall. I'm 64 years old, and until recently, I believed I understood exactly what it meant to be needed. I live in Portland, Oregon, in a quiet neighborhood lined with maple trees that turn a brilliant red every fall. The kind of place where people still wave to each other from their porches and leave handwritten notes in mailboxes instead of texts. It's the same house where I raised my daughter Emily, the same house where I held her the night she came home from the hospital, wrapped in a pale yellow blanket her father picked out. That was before everything changed. My husband Richard passed away when Emily was just 9 years old. A sudden heart attack. No warning. One ordinary morning, he kissed me goodbye before work. And by evening, my world had collapsed into something unrecognizable. I remember standing in the hospital hallway, gripping the edge of a plastic chair so tightly my fingers went numb, thinking I don't have the luxury to fall apart. Not now. Not with a child who still needs bedtime stories and packed lunches. So I didn't fall apart. Not where anyone could see. I became both parents overnight. I worked wherever I could, morning shifts at a cafe, afternoons at a small floral shop, sometimes even late night bookkeeping for a friend's business. I learned how to fix leaky faucets, how to negotiate bills, how to stretch a dollar until it nearly broke. And through all of it, I made sure Emily never felt the weight of what we were missing. To her, I was just mom. The one who showed up, the one who clapped the loudest at every school recital, who baked cupcakes at midnight because she forgot to tell me until the last minute, who sat on the edge of her bed during thunderstorms and told her stories about brave girls who always found their way home. We were close, not just as mother and daughter, but as two people who had survived something together. When Emily got into college on a partial scholarship, I cried harder than I had at Richard's funeral. Not from grief, but from pride, from relief, from the quiet, overwhelming realization that somehow against all odds we had made it. After she graduated, I sold the floral shop. By then I had managed to turn it into something modestly successful, and the sale gave me enough to finally slow down. I wasn't wealthy, not in the way some people define it, but I was comfortable. More importantly, I was free for the first time in decades to breathe. Emily found a job in marketing, moved into a sleek apartment downtown, and began building a life that looked nothing like the one I had known at her age. She was independent, confident, and bright in a way that made strangers turn their heads when she walked into a room. And then she met Daniel Brooks. The first time I heard his name, it was over the phone. Emily's voice carried a kind of excitement I hadn't heard since she was a teenager, talking about her first crush. "Mom, he's different," she said. "He's stable, grounded. He knows what he wants." At the time, that sounded like everything I had hoped she would find. The first time I met him, he brought a bottle of wine and a carefully rehearsed smile. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of calm confidence that immediately puts people at ease. He asked polite questions, listened attentively, even offered to help clear the dishes after dinner. If you had asked me that night what I thought of him, I would have said he was charming, respectful, a good match for my daughter. But there was something else, too. Something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't anything obvious, not a rude comment or a careless gesture. It was subtler than that. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes. The way he watched people not with warmth, but with calculation, as if he were quietly assessing what role they might play in his life. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, I had spent years being cautious, protective, maybe too protective. It was possible I simply didn't know how to trust someone new in Emily's life. So I pushed the feeling aside. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel became a regular presence. Family dinners, weekend visits, holidays. He fit into our lives so seamlessly that at times it felt as though he had always been there. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started with small changes. Emily called less often. Where she used to drop by unannounced just to sit on the couch and talk now, every visit required planning, scheduling, confirmation. There was always a reason she couldn't stay long. I have work early tomorrow. Daniel and I already made plans. I'll call you later, Mom. Later didn't always come. At first, I didn't question it. That's what happens when children grow up, I reminded myself. They build their own lives, their own priorities. But then I began to notice something else. When I texted Emily sometimes, Daniel would reply instead. Short, polite messages. She's busy right now. I'll let her know. We'll get back to you. We. It was always we. The first time it happened, I laughed it off. The second time, I felt a flicker of discomfort. By the third, it began to settle into something heavier, something that lingered long after I put my phone down. One evening, I invited Emily over for dinner. Nothing special, just her favorite roast chicken with rosemary, the way I used to make it when she was younger. She hesitated. Let me check with Daniel, she said. Check. With Daniel. I remember standing in my kitchen phone pressed to my ear, staring at the empty chair across the table as a strange, quiet realization began to form. It wasn't just that Emily was busy, it was that I was no longer part of the decision. When she finally arrived an hour late, Daniel was with her. Of course he was. He greeted me with that same polished smile, placing a hand lightly on Emily's back, as if guiding her into the room. Hope you don't mind, he said. I figured we could all spend time together. We, again. Dinner was pleasant on the surface. Conversation flowed. Laughter came at the appropriate moments. But underneath it all, I felt like a guest in my own home. Like I was watching a version of my life from the outside, unable to quite step back into it. At one point, Emily reached for her glass, and Daniel gently adjusted it closer to her without looking. A small gesture. Thoughtful even. But the way she smiled at him, grateful, almost dependent, made something inside me tighten. After dinner, as I stood at the sink washing dishes, I caught my reflection in the window. The soft lines on my face, the silver strands in my hair, the tiredness I had learned to hide over the years. For the first time, I wondered if I had become unnecessary. Not unloved, just no longer needed. And that was when the unease I had been ignoring finally found its voice. Because Daniel Brooks didn't just enter our lives, he was quietly, carefully reshaping them. And I wasn't sure Emily even noticed. If I had to point to the exact moment things truly began to change, I don't think I could. Because it wasn't one moment. It was a series of small, almost invisible shifts, like a house settling into the ground inch by inch, until one day you notice the doors no longer close properly. That's what Daniel did. He didn't storm in and take control. He rearranged things quietly until everything belonged to him. At first, it was just timing. Emily and I used to have Sunday mornings together. Coffee pastries, sometimes a walk through the farmer's market downtown. It had been our routine for years, our small tradition that survived everything life threw at us. One Sunday, she canceled. Daniel booked us a brunch, she said. It's important for his networking. I smiled into the phone. Of course, sweetheart. Another time. Another time didn't come. The next Sunday, she was busy again, and the one after that. Eventually, the tradition disappeared without either of us saying it out loud. Then came the messages. Emily used to text in long, rambling paragraphs, little updates about her day, random thoughts, photos of things that reminded her of me. Now her messages were short, clean, almost edited. Busy today. Talk later. Everything's good. There was no warmth in them, no personality, just information. One evening, I decided to call instead. It rang twice before someone picked up. Hello, it wasn't Emily. It was Daniel. There was a brief pause, just long enough for me to register the shift before he spoke again. She's in the shower, he said smoothly. Can I take a message? I hesitated. It's her mother. I know, he replied, still polite. What would you like me to tell her? Something about the way he said it, calm, controlled, like this was perfectly normal, made my chest tighten. I'll call back, I said. No need, he answered. I'll make sure she gets it. I hung up slowly, staring at my phone as a quiet unease settled in. That night, Emily never called back. The next day, she sent a text. Sorry, Mom. Crazy night. Everything okay? No mention of Daniel answering her phone. No explanation. Just normal. I told myself I was overreacting, but the pattern continued. More canceled plans, more unanswered calls, more moments where Daniel seemed to be standing subtly politely between me and my daughter. And then there were the conversations, or rather, the changes in them. One afternoon, Emily came over alone. It had been weeks since I'd seen her without Daniel, and for a moment it felt like things were back to normal. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring in through the windows, and I made her tea the way I always had. For a while, we talked about nothing: work, weather, a new restaurant she wanted to try. Then I asked a simple question. So, how are you really? She paused, just for a second, but I saw it, the hesitation. I'm good, she said quickly. Really good. You seem busy? I added gently. Daniel and I have a lot going on, she replied. We're building something together. Something. The word lingered in the air between us. I nodded, trying to keep my voice light. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I just miss you, that's all. Her expression softened for a moment. I miss you too, Mom. But then almost immediately something shifted. Her posture straightened. Her tone changed. You know, she said, Daniel thinks it might be good if we set a few boundaries. Boundaries. The word felt foreign coming from her. What kind of boundaries? I asked carefully. Oh, nothing major, she said quickly. Just, you know, giving us space, letting us handle things on our own. I've always let you handle things on your own. I said, my voice quieter than I intended. I know, she replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping in. But sometimes it feels like you're still very involved. Very involved. I swallowed. I raised you alone, Emily. Being involved was my job. And you did an amazing job, she said, reaching for my hand. But I'm not a child anymore. I know that. Then trust me, she said. The words weren't harsh, but they landed like a door gently closing. I nodded, forcing a small smile. Of course I trust you. But as she pulled her hand back, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else had slipped away. Later that evening, after she left, I stood by the window, watching her car disappear down the street, and for the first time I felt it clearly. Not just distance, displacement. Like I was being moved out of my own place in her life. That feeling only deepened in the weeks that followed. Daniel began appearing in conversations even when he wasn't there. Daniel says it's better if Daniel believes it was always Daniel. His opinions, his plans, his vision. Emily didn't just agree with him, she deferred to him. One night, I made the mistake of asking about their future. Have you two talked about where you'll live after the wedding? I asked casually over dinner. Emily smiled. Actually, yes. Daniel has a plan. Of course he did. We're looking at a property just outside the city, she continued. Something we can invest in together. That sounds exciting, I said. Have you seen it yet? Not in person, she admitted. But Daniel's been handling the details. Handling. Will both your names be on the paperwork? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated. I think so, she said. Daniel's working with a lawyer to set everything up properly. A lawyer. A small, quiet alarm went off in my mind. What kind of lawyer? I asked. She shrugged. I don't remember his name. Someone Daniel trusts. Someone Daniel trusts? Not someone she trusts. not someone we had discussed. Just Daniel. I nodded slowly, but inside, something shifted. Because suddenly all those small changes didn't feel random anymore. They felt intentional, coordinated, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't been able to see before. And then came the moment I couldn't ignore. I was sitting in my living room, flipping through an old photo album when my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. But when I opened it, something felt off. The wording was too formal, too precise. Hi, Mom, just wanted to let you know Daniel and I will be unavailable this weekend. We have prior commitments. Hope you understand. It wasn't her voice. I knew my daughter. This wasn't how she spoke to me. I stared at the screen, my heart beating just a little faster, as a thought formed quiet but undeniable. I wasn't just losing access to Emily. Someone was controlling it. And deep down, I already knew who. Daniel Brooks wasn't just becoming part of our family. He was positioning himself at the center of it. And if I didn't understand what he was really after, I had a feeling I might lose my daughter completely. The dinner invitation came on a Wednesday afternoon. It was from Emily, but I could almost hear Daniel's voice behind the words. Mom, Daniel's parents would love to meet you. We're having dinner this Saturday. It would mean a lot if you came. Would love to meet you. Would mean a lot? It sounded warm, thoughtful, like the kind of thing families say when they're trying to build something together. And maybe part of me still wanted to believe that was true. So I said yes. Saturday evening, I stood in front of my closet longer than I cared to admit. I didn't own designer dresses or anything that looked particularly impressive, but I chose something simple and elegant, a navy blue dress I had worn to Emily's college graduation. It made me feel steady, like a version of myself I recognized. I even stopped by a small bakery on the way and picked up a lemon tart. Emily used to love lemon desserts when she was younger. It felt like bringing a small piece of our history into a room full of strangers. Daniel's parents lived in a large house just outside the city. Modern polished, the kind of place where everything looked untouched, like it had been arranged more for display than for living. Daniel opened the door. Katherine, he said with that same practiced smile. You look lovely. Thank you, I replied. His tone was warm, his posture relaxed. Anyone watching would have thought this was a man who respected his future mother-in-law. But as he stepped aside to let me in, I felt it again. That subtle, invisible shift, like I was entering a space where I didn't quite belong. Emily greeted me with a quick hug, too quick, and then guided me into the dining room. That's where I met them. Linda Brooks sat at the head of the table, her posture straight, her expression composed in a way that felt less like calm and more like control. She wore a cream-colored blouse and a pearl necklace that caught the light every time she moved. Beside her sat Robert Brooks, quieter, heavier in presence, but softer in demeanor. He gave me a small nod as I approached his eyes, lingering just long enough to suggest he was observing more than he was saying. Catherine Linda said, her smile polite but thin. It's so nice to finally meet you. Likewise, I said, placing the lemon tart on the table. I brought a little dessert. How thoughtful. She replied, though her tone didn't quite match the words. Dinner began smoothly enough. The conversation stayed on safe topics, at first weather, traffic, Emily's job. Daniel filled the silences effortlessly, guiding the discussion like a host who had done this many times before. But gradually, the direction shifted. So Catherine Linda said, setting down her glass with deliberate precision, Emily tells us, you used to run a floral shop. I did, I said. For many years, and now I retired after I sold it. Linda nodded slowly as if filing that information away. That must have been modestly successful, she said. There it was. Not a question. An assessment. It did well enough, I replied calmly. How lovely, she said, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I always admire people who can build something from the ground up. It shows resilience. Resilience. Another word that sounded kind on the surface, but carried something sharper underneath. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching the exchange with quiet interest. We value independence in this family, he added casually. Everyone contributes. Everyone stands on their own. I nodded. I agree. Of course you do, Linda said. Emily has done wonderfully for herself. We're very proud of the life she's building. As am I said. There was a brief pause. Then Linda continued, and it's important, don't you think, that young couples have the space to grow without too much external influence? There it was again, the implication. I felt Emily shift slightly beside me. I've always encouraged Emily to make her own decisions, I said carefully. I'm sure you have, Linda replied. It's just that sometimes parents have a hard time letting go. The words were gentle. The message was not. Daniel cleared his throat lightly. We've actually been discussing some plans for after the wedding, he said, redirecting the conversation. Long-term investments, property mostly. Really, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Yes, he continued. There's a place just outside the city. Great potential. With the right structure, it could be a very smart move. Structure, I asked. Financial structure, he clarified. Ownership leverage, long-term equity. You know, I did know, or at least I understood enough to recognize where this was going. Emily smiled, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Daniel's been handling most of it, she said. He's really good with these things. I'm sure he is, I replied. Linda leaned forward slightly. And of course, she added, when families come together, it's natural to consider how resources can be aligned. Aligned. I felt the words settle heavily in the room. What do you mean? I asked. Oh, nothing complicated, she said smoothly. Just that Emily is your only child, isn't she? Yes. And naturally, you would want to see her secure, stable, well positioned for the future. Of course. Then I'm sure you understand the importance of planning ahead, she said, ensuring that everything is properly arranged. There it was. Not subtle anymore. Not really. I glanced at Emily, but she avoided my eyes, focusing instead on her plate. Daniel picked up his glass, his expression calm. We're just trying to build something strong, he said. Something that lasts. And that requires trust, Linda added. From everyone involved. Trust. The word echoed in my mind. But this didn't feel like trust. It felt like expectation. Like they were already counting on something that hadn't been offered. I set my fork down gently. Emily will always have my support, I said. But she's also capable of making her own choices. I trust her to do what's right for herself. Linda's smile tightened just slightly. Of course, she said. We all do. But the way she said it, it didn't sound like agreement. It sounded like a calculation that hadn't quite gone the way she expected. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of polite conversation and carefully measured words. When it was finally over, Emily walked me to the door. Thank you for coming, Mom, she said, her voice soft. Of course, I replied. I studied her face, searching for something, anything that might tell me she understood what had just happened. Are you okay? I asked gently. She hesitated. I'm fine, she said. Really. But her eyes told a different story. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt it more clearly than ever. This wasn't just about personality differences. This wasn't just about boundaries. Daniel and his family weren't simply welcoming Emily into their lives. They were planning something, something that involved her future, her finances, and somehow, me. And as I drove home that night, one thought kept repeating in my mind. They weren't just interested in my daughter, they were interested in what came with her. And I had a feeling I was about to find out exactly how far they were willing to go. I didn't sleep much that night after dinner at the Brooks house. It wasn't anything they said directly, not really. It was everything underneath it, the pauses, the careful wording, the way Linda spoke about alignment, like it was something already decided. Like I was simply expected to agree. By morning, the unease had settled into something sharper. Clarity. I told myself I needed proof. Not feelings, not assumptions. Proof. 2 days later, I got it. It was late afternoon, one of those quiet weekdays where the house feels too still. I had just finished watering the small row of lavender by my kitchen window when I realized I'd left my phone in the car. I stepped outside the cool Oregon air, brushing against my skin, and walked down the driveway. That's when I heard it. Daniel's voice. He wasn't supposed to be there. His car was parked just around the corner, partially hidden by the neighbor's hedge. At first, I thought maybe he had come to pick Emily up, but then I remembered Emily was at work. She had told me that morning she had back-to-back meetings all day. So why was he here? I slowed my steps instinctively, moving quieter as I approached my car. His voice was low, but not low enough. "We just need to get Catherine out of the picture," he said. My heart stopped. I froze where I stood, my hand hovering inches from the car door. There was a pause, and then he continued. "No, it's not complicated. After the wedding, everything becomes a lot easier. Emily will sign she trusts me. Sign." The word echoed in my mind like a warning bell. I leaned slightly, just enough to catch more of the conversation without revealing myself. "Yeah, I've already spoken to the lawyer," Daniel said. "He's drafting the documents now. We just need her to believe it's routine. Joint ownership, shared assets, nothing unusual." Another pause, then quieter this time. "And Catherine. She won't be a problem. I'll handle that." Something cold spread through my chest. Handle that. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there listening as the man who was about to marry my daughter calmly discussed removing me from her life like I was an obstacle in a business plan. "Trust me," he said into the phone. "Once she's out of the way, everything falls into place. Out of the way." The words felt heavier than anything he had said before, because suddenly everything made sense. The distance, the boundaries, the subtle push to isolate Emily from me. It wasn't about independence, it was about control. After a moment, I heard him sigh. "Look, I'll call you later. I need to go." Panic surged through me. I stepped back quickly, moving around the side of the house before he could see me. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. A few seconds later, I heard his car engine start. Then silence. I stayed where I was for a long moment, my body trembling slightly as I tried to steady my breathing. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was real. Daniel wasn't just manipulating Emily emotionally. He was planning something legal, something deliberate, something that involved documents, signatures, and removing me from the equation. Slowly, I walked back into the house and closed the door behind me. For a few minutes, I simply stood there staring at nothing. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out my laptop, and started searching. It didn't take long. All I had was a first name. Daniel had mentioned the lawyer, but something about the way he said it stuck with me. I tried variations, combinations, local firms, and then I found it. A name that appeared in multiple articles. A name connected to several complaints. Gregory Hale. The articles were vague at first: questionable estate practices, disputed asset transfers, legal gray areas involving elderly clients. But the deeper I looked, the clearer the pattern became. He specialized in structuring financial agreements, joint ownership, asset transfers, situations where one party, often older, often less legally informed, ended up losing control without fully understanding how it happened. My stomach turned. This wasn't coincidence. This was strategy. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Emily. She trusted Daniel completely. If he put a document in front of her framed as something normal, something beneficial, she would sign it. She wouldn't question it. And if that document involved property, my thoughts stopped abruptly. Property. The house. The one Emily had been talking about. The one Daniel was handling. I stood up so quickly the chair scraped loudly against the floor. No. No, no, no. I walked to the hallway and pulled open the small cabinet where I kept my important papers. Mortgage documents, deeds, insurance. My hands shook slightly as I flipped through them. There it was. The title to the house Emily was currently living in. Still in my name. Completely. Emily had moved in 2 years ago when I downsized my life after selling the shop. I had let her take over the house, not officially, not legally, but as a gesture of trust, a step toward her independence. We had talked about transferring ownership eventually, but we hadn't done it yet. I had never felt the need to rush, until now. A slow, chilling realization settled over me. Daniel wasn't planning to build something new. He was planning to take what already existed. And to do that, he needed access, legal access, through Emily. I sank back into the chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. This wasn't just about distance anymore. This wasn't even just about manipulation. This was an operation, carefully planned, carefully executed, and I had been standing on the outside, watching it unfold piece by piece without seeing the full picture. Until now, I closed my eyes for a moment, forcing myself to think. Panic wouldn't help. Fear wouldn't help. I needed to be precise, careful, because if Daniel realized I knew, he would change his approach, and I would lose whatever advantage I still had. When I opened my eyes again, something inside me had shifted. The hurt was still there, the betrayal, but underneath it, something stronger had taken root. Resolve. I reached for my phone. There was only one person I trusted with something like this. Margaret Whitmore. We had been friends for over 30 years. She had been a lawyer before she retired, sharp, methodical, and impossible to intimidate. If anyone could help me understand what I was dealing with, it was her. My fingers hovered over her name for a moment before I pressed call. The line rang twice, then 3 times. Finally, her voice came through. "Katherine," she said. "Is everything all right?" I swallowed, steadying my voice. "No," I said quietly. "Everything is not all right." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then, in that calm, unwavering tone I had always trusted, she replied, "Tell me everything." And for the first time since I heard Daniel's voice in my driveway, I did. Margaret didn't interrupt me once. Not while I told her about the dinner. Not when I repeated Daniel's words in my driveway. Not even when my voice trembled slightly, describing the articles I had found about Gregory Hale. She just listened. Carefully. Completely. When I finally finished, there was a long pause on the line. Then she exhaled slowly. "Katherine." She said, her voice steady, but firmer than before. "You're not imagining this." A strange mix of relief and dread settled in my chest. "I was hoping you'd say I was," I admitted quietly. "I can't," she replied. "Everything you've described, it fits a pattern I've seen before." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of pattern?" "The kind where someone isolates a vulnerable point in a family," she said, "gains trust, and then uses legal mechanisms to redirect assets. It's rarely obvious at the beginning. It looks like partnership, support, planning for the future." And then I asked. And then she continued. "Once the paperwork is signed, it's very difficult to undo." I closed my eyes. "Emily." "She wouldn't understand what she's signing," I said. "That's often the case," Margaret replied, "especially when trust is involved." A silence stretched between us. "What do I do?" I asked. Margaret didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice had shifted, slightly more strategic now. First she said, "You don't confront him." "Not yet." "I already tried to talk to Emily," I said. "She didn't believe me." "That's because you're trying to pull her out of something she doesn't see as dangerous," Margaret explained. "From her perspective, you're disrupting her life. Her relationship, her future. The truth of that stung. So I just watch it happen." I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "No," Margaret said firmly. "You prepare." The word landed differently than I expected. Prepare. How, I asked. "By understanding exactly what he's planning," she said, "and making sure he doesn't realize you're aware of it." I leaned forward slightly, my mind beginning to shift gears. You think he'll move faster if he suspects something? Absolutely, she replied. People like Daniel rely on control. If he feels that slipping, he'll accelerate the process or change tactics entirely. That made sense. Too much sense. Okay, I said slowly. So I stay quiet? Yes. And then what? Then we gather information, she said. Documents, timelines, anything that shows intent. And most importantly, she paused. We protect what's legally yours. My eyes drifted toward the cabinet, where I had just found the house documents. It's still in my name, I said. Good, Margaret replied immediately. That gives you leverage. But Emily lives there, I said. I let her take over. I never formalized anything. That may have saved you, Margaret said. If Daniel believes he can secure ownership through her, he's likely building a structure around that assumption. If we disrupt that structure at the right moment, he collapses. I finished quietly. Exactly. For the first time since this all began, I felt something other than fear. Clarity. A path forward. What about the lawyer? I asked. Gregory Hale? Margaret's tone sharpened slightly. I know of him, she said. He operates in legal gray areas. Not always enough to get disbarred, but enough to cause serious damage if someone isn't paying attention. So he'll make it look legitimate, I said. Yes, she replied, which means we need to be even more precise. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Margaret, I said after a moment, what if I'm too late? You're not? She said without hesitation. Not yet. But you don't have much time. The words settled heavily. Not yet. But close. I need you to trust me, she added. This isn't just about stopping him. It's about making sure Emily sees the truth herself. I hesitated. That's the part I'm not sure about, I admitted. Right now, she doesn't want to see anything that contradicts him. That's because she's emotionally invested, Margaret said. You can't fight that head on. You have to let the evidence speak when the moment is right. And when is that? I asked. At the point where his actions become undeniable, she said. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The wedding? Everything was building toward the wedding. That's when he'll need everything finalized, isn't it? I said slowly. Yes, Margaret replied. Events like that create pressure, deadlines, opportunities to present documents as routine. Routine. The word echoed in my mind. Just sign here. Nothing unusual. I felt a chill run through me. He's going to push her to sign something before or right after the ceremony, I said. I would expect, so Margaret confirmed. And if she does, we intervene, she said, with evidence. A silence followed. Then softly she added, But Katherine, there's something else you need to prepare for. What I asked? You may have to step away, she said. The words caught me off guard. Step away. Yes, she said. Temporarily, remove yourself from the situation. My chest tightened. You mean disappear? Not permanently, she clarified, but enough to disrupt his expectations. If he's counting on your presence, your cooperation, then removing that changes the dynamic. I thought back to Daniel's words in the church. Disappear from our family. A bitter irony settled in. He already wants that, I said quietly. Margaret paused. Then we give him exactly what he thinks he wants, she said. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? We control the narrative, she explained. If you step back on your terms, not his, you create uncertainty, pressure, mistakes. And those mistakes expose him, I said. Yes. My heart was beating faster now. Not from fear, from realization. You're saying I let him think he's winning? I said. I'm saying, Margaret replied, we let him reveal himself. I stood up slowly, walking toward the window. Outside, the world looked the same. Quiet, ordinary, but everything had changed. Margaret, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I don't want to lose my daughter. You're fighting to protect her, she said. That's not the same as losing her. I swallowed. And what if she hates me for it? I asked. There was a pause. Then sometimes Margaret said gently, "People only understand the truth after everything else falls apart." I closed my eyes. Emily's face flashed in my mind, laughing, as a child crying, as a teenager smiling, the day she told me she was getting married. "I don't want it to come to that," I whispered. "Neither do I," Margaret said. "But right now, you don't have control over what she believes." She was right. The only thing I could control was what I did next. I opened my eyes. "What's the first step?" I asked. Margaret didn't hesitate. "You act like everything is normal," she said. "You don't argue. You don't push. You let them think you've accepted your place." My place? The words stung. But I understood. And then I asked, "Then you wait," she said. "For what?" "For him to make his move." I nodded slowly. Because deep down, I knew. Daniel Brooks wasn't done. Not even close. And when he made his move, I would be ready. The next time I saw Daniel Brooks, it was in a place that was supposed to be sacred, quiet, untouchable. The church stood at the end of a narrow street lined with tall oak trees, their branches arching overhead like a protective canopy. It was the same church where Emily had once stood beside me as a little girl, her small hand wrapped tightly around mine, asking endless questions about the stained glass windows and the stories they told. Now it was where she would be married, and somehow it felt colder than I remembered. I arrived early that afternoon, telling Emily I wanted to drop off a small arrangement of white lilies for the rehearsal. She sounded distracted on the phone. Her voice rushed, but she thanked me anyway. Daniel wasn't supposed to be there, at least not yet. But as I stepped inside the echo of my heels against the polished floor, I saw him standing near the front pews, alone. He turned when he heard me, and for a brief moment, something unreadable flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or irritation. "Catherine," he said, recovering quickly, "I didn't expect to see you here so early." I could say the same. I replied calmly, setting the flowers down near the altar. He smiled. That same composed, controlled smile. "I like to make sure everything is in place," he said. "Important day tomorrow." "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." A silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, not exactly, but charged. Like something inevitable had finally reached the surface. Daniel slipped his hands into his pockets and took a few steps closer. His posture relaxed, his gaze steady. "I was actually hoping we'd have a chance to talk," he said. I turned to face him fully. So was I. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, without pretense, without softness, he said it. "The greatest gift for our wedding is if you disappear from our family." The words landed with a finality that echoed through the empty church. No hesitation, no apology, just certainty. I felt my breath catch, not because I hadn't expected it, but because hearing it out loud made everything real in a way nothing else had. "You want me to disappear?" I repeated. "Yes," he said simply. I studied his face. There was no anger there. No emotion at all, really. Just calculation. "You think that's your decision to make?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly, almost amused. "I think he said it's the best thing for everyone involved." "For everyone," I echoed. "For Emily," he clarified. "She needs space to build her life without interference." Interference. That word again. "And I'm interfering," I said. "You've been very involved," he replied. "Too involved." I let out a soft breath. "And this is your solution," I said. "Erase me." "I wouldn't put it that way," he said smoothly. "Think of it as stepping back. Permanently. Permanently." The word hung in the air between us. I took a slow step closer, close enough now to see the faint tension in his jaw, the subtle tightening around his eyes. "Are you absolutely sure that's what you want?" I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. Yes, there it was. Confirmation. Not just suspicion. Not just implication. Truth. I nodded slowly as if considering it, as if weighing his words. Inside, my heart was pounding, but my face remained calm, because Margaret had been right. This moment mattered. Every word mattered. All right, I said. Daniel blinked just once. All right, he repeated. Yes, I said, meeting his gaze. If that's what you believe is best for Emily, then I'll respect that. For the first time since I'd known him, something in his expression shifted. Surprise? Real unguarded surprise. I appreciate that, he said carefully. I'm sure you do, I replied. Another silence, but this one felt different. He was recalculating, adjusting, trying to understand why I hadn't reacted the way he expected. Thank you, he added after a moment. Truly. This will make things much smoother. Smoother. I almost smiled at the word. Instead, I simply inclined my head. I hope so, I said. I turned then, walking back toward the entrance of the church, my footsteps echoing softly in the quiet space. Katherine, he called after me. I paused, glancing over my shoulder. Yes, for what it's worth, he said, his tone almost conversational. This is the right decision. I held his gaze for a long moment. Then I said, we'll see. And I walked out. The moment the door closed behind me, the air felt different, lighter, sharper. I made my way to my car slowly, my hands steady, despite the storm of emotions beneath the surface. Once inside, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered for a second before I pressed stop. The recording ended with a soft click. I stared at the screen, my reflection faintly visible in the dark glass. Every word, every tone, captured. Proof. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel it. The anger, the hurt, the deep, aching betrayal of knowing that someone had looked at my place in my daughter's life and decided it was something to be removed. But beneath all of that, there was something else. Resolve. Because Daniel Brooks had just made one critical mistake. He believed I would disappear quietly, that I would step aside, fade away, and leave everything exactly as he wanted it. He believed he had control. He believed he had already won. I started the car, the engine humming softly as I pulled out of the parking lot. He was wrong. That evening, I packed a small suitcase. Nothing dramatic, just enough for a few days. I moved through the house, slowly, deliberately, taking in the familiar details, the worn edges of the kitchen table, the photographs on the walls, the quiet presence of a life I had built piece by piece. I paused in the hallway, my gaze lingering on a framed picture of Emily, at 10 years old, missing her front tooth, grinning at the camera with complete, unfiltered joy. I'm doing this for you, I whispered. Then I turned away. I left a single envelope on the kitchen counter, inside a short note. No explanations, no accusations, just enough to make my absence real. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I was gone. Not just from the wedding rehearsal, not just from the house, but from the role Daniel thought he could erase. And somewhere I knew he was already counting on that, counting on my silence, counting on my absence, counting on everything falling into place exactly as he planned. He had no idea that I had just stepped into a position where I could finally see the entire game, and I was no longer playing by his rules. By the time the sun rose over Portland, I was already miles away. The highway stretched out in front of me, quiet and almost empty, the early morning light casting long shadows across the road. I hadn't told anyone where I was going, not Emily, not Daniel, not even the neighbors who might have noticed my car missing from the driveway. For the first time in years, I was truly alone. And strangely, that didn't scare me. It steadied me. I drove west toward the coast, the city slowly fading behind me as the air shifted cooler, salty air, carrying the distant scent of the ocean. The closer I got, the quieter everything felt, as if the world itself was giving me space to think, to plan, to breathe. Margaret Whitmore lived in a small coastal town about 2 hours outside Portland. It was the kind of place people went when they wanted to disappear, not dramatically, not in a way that raised questions, but quietly, intentionally, exactly what I needed. When I pulled into her driveway, she was already standing on the porch, a light cardigan wrapped around her shoulders, her expression calm but focused. "You look like you haven't slept," she said as I stepped out of the car. "I haven't," I admitted. She nodded as if that confirmed something she already knew. "Come inside." Her house was warm, filled with soft light and the faint scent of lavender. Books lined the walls, their spines worn from years of use. It felt safe in a way my own home hadn't in days. I set my suitcase down near the door. "Did you bring it?" she asked. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, unlocking it and handing it to her. "The recording," I said. She took it without a word, her eyes scanning the screen before she pressed play. We stood there in silence as Daniel's voice filled the room. Clear. Unmistakable. "The greatest gift for our wedding is if you disappear from our family." Margaret didn't react immediately. She listened all the way through every word, every pause, before stopping the recording and handing the phone back to me. "That's good," she said. "Good." The word felt strange in this context. "It's cruel," I replied. "It's evidence," she corrected. I nodded slowly. "Combined with what you overheard in the driveway," she continued, "this establishes intent. Isolation control, financial planning, it all aligns." "So what do we do with it?" I asked. "Not yet," she said. "Timing matters." Of course it did. Everything about this situation came down to timing. Margaret moved toward the kitchen, gesturing for me to sit. "Tell me exactly what you left behind," she said. I sank into the chair, exhaustion finally beginning to settle into my bones. "A note," I said. "Simple. I told Emily I needed time, that I didn't want to interfere with her life or her wedding." Margaret nodded. "Good. That reinforces his assumption." "That I'm stepping aside?" I said. "Yes." I let out a quiet breath. "And what about Emily?" I asked. "She's going to be confused. Hurt." "She might be," Margaret said gently. "But right now, confusion works in our favor." I looked down at my hands. "I hate that I admitted." "I know," she said. "But this isn't about comfort. It's about clarity." Clarity. The word echoed in my mind. Because that's what Emily needed. Not my warnings, not my fears. Clarity. Margaret reached for a folder on the counter and slid it toward me. "I started pulling records last night after we spoke," she said. I opened it slowly. Inside were printed documents, notes, highlighted sections. "Property filings," she explained. "Preliminary drafts associated with the address you mentioned. Nothing finalized yet, but enough to show intent." I scanned the pages, my stomach tightening. Daniel's name, Emily's name, structured ownership language, legal phrasing designed to look standard, but layered with conditions I barely understood. "What does this mean?" I asked, pointing to a section. "It means Margaret said that if Emily signs under these terms, control of the property could shift significantly, especially if combined with joint financial accounts." "Without her realizing it," I said. "Yes." I closed the folder slowly. "He's not just planning to share a life with her," I said. "He's planning to absorb everything around her." Margaret didn't respond. She didn't need to. We both knew it was true. "What happens if she signs before we act?" I asked. Margaret's expression tightened slightly. "Then it becomes more complicated," she said. "Not impossible to challenge, but harder. Longer, and emotionally more damaging." I nodded. "So we stop it before that point," I said. "Yes," she replied. "But we don't stop it quietly." I looked up at her. "What do you mean?" "We let it reach the moment where it's supposed to happen," she said. "The signing, the pressure, the expectation. And then we intervene with everything." The image formed in my mind instantly. The wedding, the reception, the moment when everything Daniel had planned was supposed to fall into place. "That's risky," I said. "It is," she agreed. "But it's also the only way to make sure Emily sees the full picture." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "She's going to feel betrayed," I said. "No matter what. Not if she understands why," Margaret replied. And if she doesn't, Margaret met my gaze. Then you'll still have protected her, she said. A silence settled between us, because that was the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't about being understood. It was about doing what was right, even if it hurt. I stood up slowly, walking toward the window. Outside, the ocean stretched endlessly, its surface shifting under the morning light. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine a different version of events. One where Daniel was kind, where Emily was safe, where none of this had happened. But that version didn't exist. This was the reality, and I had to face it. When do we go back? I asked. Margaret joined me at the window. Not yet, she said. Let things unfold. They'll be looking for me, I said. Yes, she replied. And that creates pressure. On Emily, I said quietly. And on him, Margaret added, he's expecting you to be present, to cooperate. Your absence disrupts that. I nodded. Good, I said. Margaret studied me for a moment. You're calmer than I expected, she said. I'm not calm, I replied. I'm focused. She gave a small approving nod. That's better. I turned back toward the room, my mind already moving through the steps ahead. The wedding, the documents, the moment everything would come to light. Daniel thought he had removed me from the equation. He thought my absence meant surrender. But in reality, it was the first move I had made on my own terms. And somewhere I knew the pressure was already building. Emily would be asking questions. Daniel would be adjusting his plan. Mistakes would be made, and when they were, we would be ready. The morning of the wedding arrived without me, and that more than anything was the first crack in Daniel's perfect plan. I didn't need to be there to know it. By mid-morning, my phone had already lit up with missed calls. Emily. 3 times. Then again. A message followed. Mom, where are you? Are you okay? Please call me. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my chest tightening at the panic I could almost hear in her words. Then another message came through, this time from Daniel. We're concerned about your absence. This isn't the time for misunderstandings. Please respond. Concerned. I almost smiled at the choice of word. He wasn't concerned. He was adjusting. I set the phone down on the small table beside me and walked out onto Margaret's porch. The ocean stretched endlessly in front of me, calm and indifferent to everything unfolding miles away. Any updates? Margaret asked from behind me. They've noticed I'm gone, I said. Of course they have. Emily's worried, I added quietly. And him? She asked. I picked up my phone again, reading Daniel's message one more time. He's trying to keep control, I said. Even now. Margaret nodded. That means we're right on schedule. Schedule. It sounded so clinical, so detached from the reality of what was happening. Because somewhere in Portland, my daughter was getting ready for her wedding, without her mother. And that thought hurt more than I had expected. I should call her, I said suddenly. Margaret didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was calm but firm. Not yet. I closed my eyes briefly. She's scared. Yes, Margaret said. And that fear will make her start asking the right questions. Or it will push her closer to him, I countered. Margaret stepped beside me, her gaze steady. Katherine, if you step in now, you become the problem again, she said. Daniel will use your return to reinforce his narrative that you're controlling, that you're trying to disrupt her life. I knew she was right. That didn't make it easier. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to step back. All right, I said. We went back inside. Margaret had already set up a small workspace on her dining table, documents neatly arranged, notes carefully organized. It looked less like a retirement home and more like a quiet command center. Let's walk through the timeline again, she said. I sat down across from her, focusing. The ceremony is at noon, she continued. Reception immediately after, and the documents I asked. They'll likely appear during the reception, she said. Casual setting, less formal pressure, more emotional vulnerability. I nodded. That's when he'll push her to sign, I said. Yes. A silence followed. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message from Emily. Mom, please? I don't understand what's happening. Did I do something wrong? The words hit harder than anything before. Did I do something wrong? My throat tightened. No, I whispered under my breath. You didn't. Margaret watched me carefully. This is the hardest part, she said. I know, I replied. And I did, because every instinct I had as a mother was screaming at me to fix it, to call her, to explain everything, to make the confusion stop. But that wasn't what Emily needed. Not yet. She needed to see, for herself. Around noon, the messages stopped. That was when I knew the ceremony had begun. I imagined it. Emily walking down the aisle, the music, the guests, the vows, and one empty seat where I should have been. The thought cut deeper than I expected. I should have been there, I said quietly. Margaret didn't argue. No, she said. You shouldn't. I looked at her. If you were there, she continued, Daniel would adjust. He'd delay. He'd hide his intentions better. He'd wait for another opportunity. I nodded slowly. And now I asked. Now he has pressure, she said. And pressure creates mistakes. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I had spent my entire life protecting Emily from pain. And now, I was letting her walk into it, because it was the only way to pull her out. An hour passed, then another. The afternoon light shifted, casting longer shadows across the room. And then, my phone rang. Emily. I froze. For a moment I couldn't move. Catherine Margaret said softly, breathe. I nodded, picking up the phone. My hand trembled slightly as I answered. Emily. Her voice came through immediately. Mom. One word, but it carried everything. Relief, fear, confusion. I'm here, I said. Where are you? She asked. Why aren't you here? I swallowed. I needed time, I said carefully. I didn't want to interfere. Interfere, she repeated. You're my mother. The pain in her voice made my chest ache. I know, I said softly. Then why would you just disappear? She asked. There it was. The word disappear. I closed my eyes briefly. Emily, I said, choosing each word carefully. Are you happy right now? There was a pause. A long one. I don't know, she admitted. The honesty in that answer sent a quiet wave of relief through me. What's going on? I asked gently. Another pause. Then Daniel wants me to sign something, she said. My grip tightened on the phone. When I asked, now she said. At the reception. He says it's just paperwork for the house, that it's routine. Routine. Exactly as we expected. What do you think I asked? I don't understand it, she admitted. But he says it's normal. Of course he did. Emily, I said carefully. Do you feel comfortable signing something you don't understand? No, she said immediately. Then don't, I replied. Silence. Then, he's going to be upset, she said. That's not your responsibility, I said. Another pause. He told me you were trying to control me, she said quietly. I felt something twist inside me. And what do you think I asked? I don't know anymore, she said. That was it. The crack. Small, but real. Emily, I said softly, I need you to trust yourself. Not him. Not me. Yourself. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, I said. I wish you were here. The words nearly broke me. I will be, I said. Soon. There was a shift in her breathing. What does that mean? She asked. It means, I said, my voice steady. Now you're not alone in this. I ended the call a few minutes later, my heart still racing. Margaret looked at me. Well, she asked. He's moving forward, I said. Right on time. And her Margaret asked? I took a slow breath. She's starting to see it, I said. Margaret nodded. Then it's almost time. I looked down at my phone at the last message Emily had sent, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt it. Hope. Because Daniel Brooks thought my absence had given him control. But in reality, it had given Emily something far more dangerous. Doubt. And once doubt begins to grow, the truth isn't far behind. I didn't realize how loud a room could feel without actually hearing it until I imagined the reception. The clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversation, laughter layered over tension no one else could quite name. And somewhere in the middle of it all, my daughter standing in a white dress holding a pen she wasn't ready to use. I stayed by Margaret's window long after the call ended, staring out at the shifting gray blue of the ocean. The tide was coming in slow and steady, reshaping the shoreline in ways that were almost invisible unless you were paying close attention. That's what this felt like, a shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Walk me through exactly what she said Margaret called from the table behind me. I turned, pulling myself back into focus. She said he wanted her to sign something at the reception, I said. He told her it was routine, just paperwork for the house. Margaret nodded, already flipping through the documents she'd prepared, and her reaction. She hesitated, I said. She admitted she didn't understand it. That's important, Margaret said. That hesitation is where we intervene. I crossed the room slowly. She's scared, I added. She should be, Margaret replied. But fear can clarify things if it's not immediately silenced. I sat down across from her, my mind still replaying Emily's voice. I don't know anymore. That was the moment everything changed. Because for the first time, she wasn't defending him. She was questioning. What's our move? I asked. Margaret slid a document toward me. We don't wait for him to finish, she said. We interrupt the process before she signs. At the reception, I asked. Yes. I hesitated. That's going to cause a scene. Margaret met my gaze. Good, she said. The word landed with more force than I expected. This isn't something you resolve quietly in a corner, she continued. He's relying on privacy, on control, on the assumption that no one will challenge him in front of others. And if we do, I asked. He loses the narrative, she said, immediately. I leaned back, letting the idea settle. A public confrontation, in the middle of a wedding reception. It wasn't what I had imagined when Emily told me she was getting married. But then again, nothing about this situation had followed the path I expected. What if she feels humiliated? I asked quietly. Margaret's expression softened just slightly. She might, she said. But there's a difference between temporary embarrassment and long-term damage. I nodded. I knew which one mattered more. Still, the thought of Emily standing there surrounded by guests, everything unraveling around her, it made my chest tighten. She deserves better than this, I said. She does? Margaret agreed. Which is why we're doing it now. I looked down at the documents again. Walk me through exactly what he's trying to do, I said. Margaret folded her hands. The structure he's setting up looks like a standard joint ownership agreement, she explained. On the surface, it's harmless. Shared property, shared responsibility. But underneath, I asked. There are clauses, she said, tapping the page. Control clauses. If certain financial conditions aren't met, or if one party becomes unable to manage the asset, the other party gains decision-making authority. My stomach dropped. Unable? I repeated. Yes, she said. It's intentionally vague. It can be interpreted in multiple ways, meaning he could claim Emily isn't capable of managing it, I said slowly. Or manipulate circumstances to make it appear that way, Margaret added. I exhaled sharply. And the house, I asked. If your property becomes part of that structure, she said he gains indirect control over it as well. Everything tightened in my chest. This wasn't just about Emily. It was about everything I had built, everything I had worked for. And she wouldn't see it, I said. Not without guidance, Margaret replied. I closed my eyes for a moment, because that was the hardest part. Emily wasn't careless. She wasn't naive. She was trusting. And Daniel had used that. I opened my eyes again. We need to make sure she understands before she signs anything, I said. Yes, Margaret said, but not just by telling her, by showing her I finished. She nodded. Exactly. A silence settled between us as we both considered what that would look like. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from Emily. He's getting impatient. I felt my pulse quicken. What does that mean? Margaret asked. He's pushing her, I said, reading the message again. He wants this done. Margaret glanced at the clock. He's running out of time, she said. That's good. Good, I echoed. Yes, she said. Impatience leads to mistakes. I typed quickly. Don't sign anything yet. I'm on my way. I hesitated before sending it. Once I did, there was no going back. Margaret watched me. That's it, she said. I nodded. That's it. I stood up, my movements more deliberate now, focused. We should leave, I said. Margaret was already gathering the documents. I'll bring everything we need, she said. Printed copies, legal notes, the recording. The recording I repeated. The memory of Daniel's voice echoed in my mind. Disappear from our family. He had said it so easily, so confidently, like I didn't matter, like I could be erased. I picked up my phone, slipping it into my bag. Not today, I murmured. Margaret looked at me. Ready? She asked. I took a deep breath. No, not ready. Not for what this would mean. Not for what Emily was about to go through, but ready enough. Let's go, I said. The drive back to Portland felt different from the one that had taken me away. Faster, sharper, every mile bringing me closer to something inevitable. Neither of us spoke much. We didn't need to. Everything that mattered had already been said. As we reached the outskirts of the city, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Emily. I told him I needed more time. He's not happy. I read it twice. Then I typed back, hold your ground. I'm almost there. Margaret glanced over. She's resisting, she said. Yes, I replied. That's your daughter, she added. A small, unexpected warmth spread through me. Yes, I said quietly. It is. We pulled into the reception venue just as the afternoon light began to fade. The building was elegant, large windows, soft lighting, the kind of place designed for celebration. From the outside, it looked perfect. Inside, I knew it wasn't. I stepped out of the car, the sound of music faintly drifting through the walls. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with something else. Purpose. Because Daniel Brooks thought this day belonged to him. He thought he had orchestrated everything, controlled every variable, removed every obstacle. But he had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated the one thing he couldn't manipulate, a mother who refuses to walk away. I adjusted my coat, glancing once at Margaret. She gave a small nod. Let's finish this, she said. And together, we walked toward the door. The doors to the reception hall were already open. Music spilled out into the hallway, soft jazz, the kind meant to feel elegant without drawing too much attention to itself. Laughter followed, light and easy, as if nothing in the world could possibly be wrong. For a moment I stood there, just outside, listening, because on the other side of those doors, my daughter was celebrating the beginning of a life built on something I now knew was a lie. Margaret touched my arm gently. Stay focused, she said. I nodded. Then I stepped inside. The room was beautiful. White tablecloths, candlelight, fresh flowers arranged with precision. Everything exactly the way Emily would have dreamed it. And there she was, standing near the center of the room, her white dress catching the soft glow of the lights, her smile polite but strained. I knew that look. Most people wouldn't notice it, but I did, because I had seen it before when she was younger, trying to hold herself together in situations she didn't fully understand. My chest tightened. She wasn't happy. Not really. Then her eyes found me, and everything stopped. The room didn't go silent. The music didn't fade. But in that moment, it felt like the entire world had narrowed down to just the two of us. Mom. The word escaped her before she could stop it. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Daniel, standing beside her, stiffened, slowly, deliberately. He turned toward me. And for the first time since I had known him, he looked unsure. "Catherine?" he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite hold. "You made it." "I said I would," I replied calmly. Emily moved toward me, her steps hesitant at first, then faster. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been calling, I know," I said softly. She stopped in front of me, her eyes searching my face. "I thought something happened," she said. "Something did?" I replied. Daniel stepped forward, then inserting himself into the space between us, subtle but intentional. "We were concerned," he said. "But I'm glad you're here now. It's an important day." I met his gaze. "Yes," I said. "It is?" There was a tension in the air now. Not obvious, but growing. Daniel cleared his throat lightly. "Actually," he said, turning to Emily, "this might be a good time to take care of that paperwork we discussed." There it was, right on cue. Emily hesitated. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her bouquet. I I don't know if this is the right moment," she said. "It's just a formality," Daniel replied smoothly. "Better to handle it now while everything's fresh." Fresh. The word felt almost absurd in this context. I stepped forward. "Before she signs anything," I said clearly, "I think we should take a moment." Daniel's smile faltered just for a second. "I don't think that's necessary," he said quickly. "It's a simple agreement. Simple things don't require pressure," I replied. A murmur rippled through the nearby guests. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Catherine?" he said, lowering his voice. "This isn't the place for no," I interrupted gently. "It's exactly the place." Emily looked between us, confusion written across her face. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked. I turned to her. "Did you read the document he wants you to sign?" I asked. She hesitated. "No," she admitted. "Not fully." "Do you understand it?" I continued. Another pause. "No." I nodded slowly. "Then you shouldn't sign it." Daniel exhaled sharply. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're turning something routine into a problem." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "Routine," I said. I handed it to Emily. "Then let's look at what routine actually means." Her hands trembled slightly as she took it. Daniel stepped closer. "You don't need to go through all that right now," he said quickly. "We can review it later." "No," Emily said suddenly. The word cut through the air, clear, firm. For the first time that day. "I want to understand it now," she said. Daniel froze, just for a moment, but it was enough. Margaret stepped forward, then her presence calm but authoritative. "I'm Margaret Whitmore," she said. "Retired attorney. I've reviewed the structure of this agreement." Daniel's expression darkened. "I don't recall inviting legal counsel," he said. "You didn't," Margaret replied. "But considering the circumstances, it seemed appropriate." Emily looked up from the folder, her eyes moving quickly across the pages. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice was no longer uncertain. It was sharp. "Focused." Daniel tried to recover. "It's just joint ownership," he said. "We talked about this." "No," Emily said slowly. "We didn't talk about this." She flipped another page. "These clauses, what do they mean?" she asked, looking at Margaret. "They allow one party to assume control under certain conditions," Margaret explained calmly. "What conditions?" Emily pressed. "Conditions that can be interpreted broadly," Margaret said. "Financial instability. Inability to manage assets." Emily's head snapped toward Daniel. "You said this was standard," she said. "It is," he insisted. "You're overcomplicating it." "Am I?" she asked. Her voice rose slightly. "Because now," she was seeing it, really seeing it. "This gives you control," she said, "over everything." "That's not." "And the house she cut in? My house." Daniel hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "It's part of the structure," he said. Emily's face went pale. "That house isn't even in my name," she said. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because now, everyone was listening. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, and that's when I took out my phone. I think there's something else you should hear, I said. I pressed play. His voice filled the room, clear, cold, unmistakable. The greatest gift for our wedding is if you disappear from our family. Gasps echoed around us. Emily's eyes widened. Her hand trembled as she covered her mouth. No, she whispered. I didn't stop the recording. We just need to get Katherine out of the picture. Daniel lunged forward. Turn that off, he snapped. But it was too late. The room had shifted. Completely. Emily will sign she trusts me. The final words hung in the air like a verdict. Silence followed. Deep. Heavy. Unforgiving. Emily stared at Daniel as if she were seeing him for the first time. You said that she asked? Her voice was barely audible, but it carried everything. Daniel straightened, his expression hardening. You're taking this out of context, he said. Out of context, she repeated. Her voice broke. You told my mother to disappear. He didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. Emily took a step back, then another, the distance between them growing with each movement. You lied to me, she said. No, he said quickly. I was trying to protect you from what she demanded. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, everything fell apart. Margaret stepped forward again. There's also evidence of financial misrepresentation, she said calmly, and a pattern of similar behavior linked to your legal counsel. Daniel's composure cracked. This is absurd, he snapped. You're all overreacting. No, Emily said. Her voice was steady now, stronger than I had heard it in months. We're finally reacting correctly. She looked down at the folder in her hands, then back at him. I'm not signing anything, she said. Daniel's jaw clenched. Emily, and I'm not marrying you, she added. The words landed like a final blow. The room erupted into whispers, shock, disbelief. But Emily didn't look at anyone else. Only him. Only the man she had almost trusted with everything. It's over, she said. And just like that, it was. For a few seconds after Emily said, I'm not marrying you, the room seemed to lose its ability to breathe. No music, no clinking glasses, just silence. The kind of silence that follows something irreversible. Daniel stood frozen in front of her, his face caught somewhere between disbelief and calculation, like he was trying to decide which version of himself would get him out of this. Charm? Control? Or force? You don't mean that, he said finally, his voice lower, now more urgent. You're overwhelmed. This is a lot to process. Emily didn't move, didn't blink. I mean exactly what I said, she replied. There was no hesitation in her voice anymore. No softness, just clarity. Daniel glanced around the room as if searching for support, for someone who might reinforce his version of reality. But the energy had shifted. People weren't looking at him with admiration anymore. They were watching him, evaluating. And for the first time, he was no longer the one in control of the narrative. Emily Linda Brooks's voice cut in sharply from across the room. All eyes turned. She stood slowly from her seat, smoothing the front of her blouse, as if this were merely an inconvenient interruption, rather than the collapse of her son's carefully constructed plan. Let's not make a scene, she said, her tone controlled but firm. Whatever misunderstanding this is, it can be handled privately. Privately. Of course. That's where everything had been designed to happen. Hidden, contained, unquestioned. No, Emily said. The word was immediate, unwavering. We're not doing this privately, she continued. Not after everything I just heard. Linda's expression tightened. You're being emotional, she said. This isn't how decisions like this should be made. Emily let out a small, disbelieving laugh. Emotional, she repeated. You think this is about emotion? She lifted the folder in her hand. This is about legal control, she said. About manipulation. About a plan that none of you thought I'd question. Linda's gaze flicked briefly toward Daniel. Just for a second. But it was enough. A silent exchange. A confirmation. And Emily saw it. Oh my God, she whispered. Her eyes widened. Not with confusion this time, but with realization. You knew, she said, her voice trembling again, but for a different reason now. Linda didn't respond. Didn't you? Emily pressed. A long pause. Then carefully, we were trying to ensure stability, Linda said. Stability? The word landed with a hollow echo. By tricking me, Emily shot back. No one tricked you, Daniel interjected quickly. We were setting up something beneficial for both of us. Emily turned to him slowly. Both of us, she said. Her voice dropped. Quieter, more dangerous. Or just you. Daniel hesitated, and that hesitation spoke louder than anything else he could have said. Robert Brooks, who had remained silent until now, shifted in his seat. He had been watching everything unfold with a heaviness in his eyes that I hadn't fully understood. Until that moment. He stood. Enough, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Daniel turned toward him, surprised. Dad, this isn't the time. No, Robert said firmly. It is. He stepped forward slowly, his gaze moving from his son to Emily, and finally to me. I'm sorry, he said. The words were directed at Emily, but they carried weight for all of us. What do you mean? Emily asked, her voice unsteady again. Robert exhaled slowly. I should have said something sooner, he admitted. I knew there were discussions, plans. I didn't agree with how they were being handled. Daniel stiffened. You didn't know anything, he said quickly. I knew enough, Robert replied. Silence fell again. He continued. I knew the lawyer Daniel chose had a history of questionable practices, he said. I knew the structure of this agreement wasn't as straightforward as it was being presented. Emily's face went pale. And you didn't tell me, she asked. Robert's shoulders lowered slightly. I thought it would pass, he said. That it wouldn't go this far. But it did, she said. Yes, he admitted. Another silence. He looked at his son then. This isn't right, he said. Daniel's composure cracked again. You're overreacting, he snapped. All of you. This is how business works. This is how you build something secure. At the cost of honesty, I said quietly. He turned toward me, his expression hardening. You've been against me from the beginning, he said. No, I replied. I was cautious. There's a difference. Emily took a step back from him. I trusted you, she said. Her voice broke slightly on the word. I was building a future with you, and I was building it with you, he insisted. No, she said, shaking her head. You were building it around me. The distinction hung in the air, sharp, clear, irrefutable. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration, finally breaking through the control he had maintained for so long. This is insane, he muttered. You're throwing everything away over a misunderstanding. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and whatever she saw, it wasn't the man she thought she knew. This isn't a misunderstanding, she said softly. This is who you are. The words landed harder than any accusation. Because they weren't emotional, they were final. Linda stepped forward again. Emily, she said, her tone shifting, softening slightly. You're making a mistake. Walking away from this, I'm walking away from a lie, Emily interrupted. And what will you do instead? Linda pressed. Start over. Throw away everything you've invested. Emily didn't hesitate. Yes, the simplicity of her answer stunned the room. Because it wasn't reckless. It was deliberate. She reached up slowly and removed the ring from her finger. The diamond caught the light for a brief moment before she held it out. Daniel stared at it, then at her. You're serious, he said. I've never been more serious in my life, she replied. She placed the ring in his hand. He didn't close his fingers around it. He just stood there holding it like something he no longer recognized. It's over, she said again. And this time, there was no doubt, no room for interpretation, just truth. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. For a moment it looked like he might argue, fight, push back. But then something in his expression shifted. Not remorse, not regret. Just calculation. Fine then. If this path was closed, he would find another. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Linda followed shortly after, her face tight with controlled anger. Robert lingered for a moment longer. "I'm sorry," he said again quietly. Then he too left. And just like that, the storm passed, leaving behind something fragile, something uncertain. Emily stood in the center of the room, her hands trembling slightly, her breath uneven. The guests began to move again, slowly, cautiously, whispers filling the space where silence had been. But Emily didn't look at them. She looked at me, and in her eyes, there was no confusion left, only truth, and the weight of everything she had just lost. For a moment after they left, Emily didn't move. She stood there in the center of the room, still in her wedding dress, still surrounded by guests who didn't quite know where to look or what to say. Some people pretended to adjust their glasses. Others reached for their phones not to record, but to avoid eye contact. A few quietly slipped toward the exits, as if leaving early might somehow erase what they had just witnessed. But Emily remained exactly where she was, alone, even though the room was full. I watched her carefully, my heart aching in a way that felt both familiar and new. I had seen her cry before. I had held her through heartbreaks, disappointments, fears. But this was different. This was the kind of pain that reshapes you. Slowly, she turned toward me. Her eyes were red, her makeup slightly smudged, but she didn't try to fix it. She didn't try to hold it together anymore. "Mom," she said, just one word. And then she broke. The tears came suddenly, uncontrollably, as if something inside her had finally given way. I moved toward her without thinking, closing the distance between us in seconds. She fell into my arms like she used to when she was a child, when the world felt too big and too confusing, and the only place that made sense was right here. "I'm so sorry," she cried into my shoulder. "I'm so, so sorry." I held her tightly, my hand resting gently against the back of her head. "It's okay," I whispered. "No, it's not," she said, pulling back just enough to look at me. "I didn't listen to you. I thought you were trying to control me. I thought, I thought you didn't want me to be happy." Her voice cracked again. "And he used that," she added, her expression twisting with pain. "He used everything I told him about us, about you." I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Not anger, not anymore. Just a deep, quiet sadness. "I know," I said softly. Emily shook her head, her hands gripping the fabric of her dress. "I let him push you away," she said. "I let him make me believe that having you in my life was a problem." "You didn't let him," I said gently. "You trusted someone you loved. That's not a weakness." "It feels like one," she whispered. I lifted my hand, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "It only becomes a weakness if you refuse to learn from it," I said. She looked at me, really looked this time like she was seeing not just her mother, but the woman in front of her. "I almost signed everything away," she said. "But you didn't," I replied. Her breath hitched slightly. "I almost married him," she added. "But you didn't," I said again. A long silence followed. Not empty, just full. Full of everything that had happened. Everything that had nearly happened. Emily glanced around the room at the guests who were now pretending to resume normal conversation, at the half-empty tables, at the decorations that suddenly felt out of place. "I don't even know what to do now," she admitted. I nodded. "That's okay," I said. "You don't have to figure everything out today." She let out a shaky breath. "I don't even want to be here," she said. "Then we leave?" I replied simply. She looked surprised. "Just leave?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "There's nothing here you need to stay for." Her gaze drifted back toward the center of the room, where the remnants of what should have been her wedding still lingered. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "We didn't make an announcement. We didn't say goodbye to anyone. We just walked out. Together." The cool air outside hit us immediately, grounding in a way the reception hall had not been. Emily exhaled deeply, as if she had been holding her breath for hours. I feel like I can finally breathe, she said. I smiled faintly. That's usually a good sign, I replied. She looked down at her dress, then let out a small, almost disbelieving laugh. I'm standing in a parking lot in a wedding dress. And I just called off my wedding, she said. When you say it like that, it does sound dramatic, I said. She glanced at me, a flicker of something softer appearing in her expression. I guess we've always been a little dramatic, she said. Only when necessary, I replied. That earned a real smile. Small, but real. For the first time that day. Margaret stepped out behind us, carrying the folder of documents. You handled that well, she said to Emily. Emily nodded, though her expression grew serious again. Thank you, she said, for everything. Margaret inclined her head. You did the hardest part, she said. You chose to see the truth. Emily swallowed. It didn't feel hard at first, she admitted. It felt obvious. Once I stopped trying to defend him. That's how clarity works, Margaret said. Emily looked at me then. Why didn't you come to me sooner, she asked. The question wasn't accusatory, it was honest. I took a moment before answering. Because every time I tried, I said you weren't ready to hear it. She nodded slowly. And disappearing, she asked. That was part of the plan. I let out a soft breath. Part of it, I admitted. But also, something I needed to do for myself. She studied me. For yourself, she repeated. Yes, I said. Because somewhere along the way, I started feeling like I was being erased from your life. And I needed to understand what that meant, without fighting it every step of the way. Her eyes filled with tears again. I never wanted you to feel that way, she said. I know, I replied gently. But I did. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I see that now, she said. Another silence settled between us. But this one felt different. Lighter. More honest. Mom, she said after a moment. Yes, I don't want you to disappear, she said. Her voice was steady now. Clear. I don't want a life where you're not part of it. My throat tightened slightly. I don't want that either, I said. She took a small step closer. Then, what happens now, she asked. I looked at her. Really looked. At the woman she had become, not just my daughter, but someone who had just made one of the hardest decisions of her life. Now I said slowly, you figure out who you are, without someone else deciding it for you. She nodded. And you? She asked. I smiled faintly. I do the same, I said. Because the truth was, this hadn't just changed her. It had changed me too, and for the first time in a long time. That didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to build from, together. The ocean looked different the morning, quieter. Less dramatic than the night before, when everything had felt like it was crashing and shifting all at once. Now the waves moved with a kind of steady rhythm, as if reminding me that even after the loudest storms, the world finds its balance again. Emily stood beside me on the small wooden deck outside Margaret's house, wrapped in one of my sweaters. Her wedding dress was gone, carefully folded, and placed in a garment bag inside. She had insisted on changing the moment we arrived the night before. I don't want to carry that with me right now, she had said. I understood. Some things weren't meant to be held on to. We hadn't talked much during the drive back from the city. There were moments where she started to speak, then stopped, as if the words hadn't fully formed yet. And I didn't push. Because this part, the quiet after everything breaks, is where the real understanding begins. Now in the soft morning light, she took a deep breath. It's strange, she said. What as I asked? How quickly everything changed, she replied. Yesterday I thought I knew exactly what my life was going to look like. She paused. And now, I don't recognize any of it. I nodded slowly. That's not always a bad thing, I said. She let out a small, uncertain laugh. It feels like one, she admitted. I leaned against the railing, watching the water. When your father died, I said quietly, I felt the same way. She turned to me, surprised. You never said that, she said. I didn't think it would help at the time, I replied. You were already dealing with enough. She studied my face as if seeing something new. What was it like? She asked. I took a moment before answering. It felt like the ground disappeared, I said. Like everything I thought was solid suddenly wasn't. I glanced at her, but over time I realized something important. What she asked softly. That just because something ends unexpectedly doesn't mean you've lost everything I said. Sometimes it means you're being given a chance to rebuild differently. She looked out at the ocean again. Differently, she repeated. Yes. A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. I keep replaying everything in my head, she said after a while. All the moments where I should have noticed something was off. That's natural, I said. I ignored so many signs, she continued. The way he spoke for me. The way he always had an answer ready when I questioned something. The way he made me feel like I was overreacting any time I hesitated. Her voice tightened slightly. I thought that was normal, she said. It's easy to mistake control for stability, I said gently. She nodded. He made everything sound so reasonable, she said. So logical. And you trusted that I replied? Yes. She turned to me again. Why didn't I see it? She asked. The question wasn't self-pitying. It was searching. Honest. Because you wanted to believe in the life you were building, I said. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I almost lost everything because of it, she said. You almost did, I agreed. Her expression shifted, not defensive, not ashamed, just aware. But I didn't, she said slowly. No, I said. You didn't. Another silence. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. What happens with him now? I exhaled softly. There will likely be legal consequences, I said. Margaret has already started documenting everything. Emily nodded. He won't just walk away from this, will he? She asked. I don't think so, I said. But that's not your responsibility anymore. She looked down at her hands. It feels like it is, she admitted. Why I asked? Because I was part of it, she said. Even if I didn't understand everything, I was still involved. I stepped closer to her. You were manipulated, I said. There's a difference. She shook her head slightly. I still have to live with the choices I made, she said. Yes, I said. But you also get to choose what you do next. She looked up at me. And what should I do? She asked. I smiled faintly. That's not something I can decide for you, I said. She hesitated. Then what can you do? She asked. I thought about that for a moment. Then I answered honestly. I can stand beside you while you figure it out, I said. Her eyes filled with emotion again, but this time it wasn't pain. It was something softer, something steadier. I'd like that, she said. We stood there for a while longer, the sound of the waves filling the space between us. Eventually she spoke again. Mom, about what you said yesterday, she began. What part? I asked. About disappearing, she said. About needing to do it for yourself. I nodded. I think I understand now, she said. I turned to her. Do you? I asked. She nodded slowly. You weren't just leaving because of him, she said. You were leaving because you were being pushed into a place where you didn't feel valued. Yes, I said quietly. And instead of fighting to stay in that place, you chose to step away, she continued. Yes. She took a deep breath. That's not weakness, she said. That's strength. I felt something shift in my chest, a kind of quiet relief. Thank you, I said. She smiled soft, genuine. I don't ever want to make you feel like that again, she said. I know, I replied. And I don't want to feel like that again either, she added. Then don't, I said gently. She tilted her head slightly. It's not that simple, she said. No, I agreed. But it starts with recognizing when something feels wrong and trusting yourself enough to question it. She nodded. I think I'm starting to learn that, she said. We walked back inside together, the warmth of the house wrapping around us as the door closed. Margaret looked up from the table. How are we feeling this morning? She asked. Emily gave a small smile. Like I survived something, she said. Margaret nodded. That's a good place to start, she replied. Emily glanced at me. I don't know what my life looks like now, she said. That's okay, I said. But I do know one thing, she added. What's that, I asked. She met my eyes. I'm not building it around someone else ever again. I smiled. Good, I said. Build it with someone, or not at all. She nodded. And you? She asked. What are you going to do now? I thought about the house in Portland, the years I had spent there, the life I had built. Then I thought about the ocean outside, the quiet, the space. I think I said slowly it might be time for something new. Emily smiled. Maybe we both need that, she said. Maybe we do, I replied. And for the first time since all of this began, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt open. A week after the wedding that never happened, the world had already begun to move on. People returned to their routines. Conversations shifted to new topics. The whispers that had followed Emily out of that reception hall faded into background noise, replaced by other people's stories, other people's dramas. But for us, everything had changed. Emily stayed with me at Margaret's house for a few days after that morning by the ocean. Not because she didn't have somewhere else to go, but because she needed time. Time without pressure. Time without someone telling her who she should be or what she should want. We kept things simple. Morning walks along the shoreline, quiet breakfasts, long conversations that didn't always have clear conclusions, but felt necessary all the same. She started sleeping better. That was the first sign. Then came the small things, laughing at something unexpected, asking questions about her own future, instead of someone else's plans, sitting in silence without feeling like she needed to fill it. She was coming back to herself, and that mattered more than anything. One afternoon, she sat across from me at Margaret's kitchen table, her laptop open, a list of notes scribbled beside it. I've been thinking, she said. That's usually a good sign, I replied. She smiled faintly. I don't want to go back to the apartment, she said. At least, not right away. I nodded. That makes sense. There are too many memories there, she added. Too many things that don't feel like mine anymore. I understood that feeling all too well. What are you thinking instead? I asked. She hesitated. Maybe I start fresh, she said. New place, new routine, something that's actually mine. I leaned back in my chair. That sounds like a strong beginning, I said. She nodded. I don't want to rush into anything, she added. I've done enough of that. That's a wise decision, I said. She glanced at me. I didn't get that from nowhere, she said. I smiled. No, I replied. You didn't. Later that evening, Margaret joined us in the living room, a folder in her hand. I have an update, she said. Emily straightened slightly. About Daniel, she asked. Margaret nodded. There's been an official inquiry opened, she said. Based on the evidence we provided, the recording, the documents, the connection to Gregory Hale. Emily's expression tightened. What does that mean? She asked. It means he's being investigated for potential financial misconduct, Margaret explained. Possibly fraud, depending on how far this goes. Emily swallowed. And his mother, she asked. Still under review, Margaret said. There's indication she was aware of the strategy, but proving direct involvement will take time. Emily nodded slowly. And his father, she added. Margaret's expression softened slightly. He's cooperating, she said, providing information where he can. That didn't surprise me. Not after what we had seen. Emily leaned back, her shoulders lowering just a fraction. I don't feel relieved, she admitted. That's normal, Margaret said. Closure doesn't always come with immediate peace. Emily looked down at her hands. I just feel tired, she said. I reached over, placing my hand gently over hers. Then rest, I said. You've been carrying a lot? She nodded. And for the first time since everything had happened, she allowed herself to simply sit in that feeling, without trying to fix it, without trying to rush past it. A few days later, we returned to Portland. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Not empty, just quiet in a new way, like it was waiting for something or someone. Emily followed me inside, her steps slower, more deliberate. I used to think this place felt small, she said. I glanced at her, and now I asked. She looked around. It feels safe, she said. I smiled. That's a good thing. We didn't rush to make decisions about the house, or about anything really. Instead, we took our time. I began sorting through old things, photographs, papers, pieces of a life that had stretched across decades. Not because I wanted to erase it, but because I was ready to decide what still belonged in my future. Emily started looking at new apartments, not the ones Daniel had chosen, not the ones that fit into someone else's plan, ones that felt right to her, ones she chose. One evening, as the sun dipped low outside the window, she sat beside me on the couch. I was thinking about something you said, she began. What's that? I asked. About disappearing, she said. I nodded. She turned slightly toward me. You didn't disappear because you were weak, she said. You disappeared because you refused to stay somewhere you weren't respected. Yes, I said quietly. She took a deep breath. I think I need to do that too, she said. My brow furrowed slightly. In what way? I asked. Not physically, she said, but emotionally, mentally. I listened. I need to step away from the version of myself that accepted things without questioning them, she continued. The version that thought love meant agreement, that trust meant silence. I felt a quiet sense of pride settle in my chest. That's not disappearing, I said. What is it? She asked. It's becoming, I replied. She smiled. I like that better, she said. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she added, Do you think we'll be okay? I turned to her. I think I said slowly, we already are. Because the truth was, we hadn't just survived something difficult. We had learned from it, grown through it, and most importantly, we had found our way back to each other. Not as we were before, but as something stronger, something more honest. A few weeks later, I made a decision. I sold the house, not out of loss, but out of intention. I moved closer to the coast into a smaller place with wide windows and the sound of the ocean always just within reach. Emily found her own apartment in the city, bright open, entirely her own. We didn't live together anymore, but we were closer than ever. And as for Daniel, he sent one letter, just one, an apology. Carefully worded, strategic even in regret. I read it once, then I put it away. I didn't respond. Because some chapters don't need a reply, they just need to end. And in the quiet that followed, I finally understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. Disappearing isn't about vanishing. It's about choosing where you no longer belong and having the strength to walk away. There are moments in life when love and loyalty become tangled in ways that are hard to separate. We're taught that family means staying, that love means enduring, that sacrifice is the highest form of care. But sometimes, the greatest act of love is knowing when to step back, not in anger, not in defeat, but in clarity. Catherine's story is not about abandonment. It's about boundaries. It's about recognizing when your presence is no longer respected and choosing not to fight for a place that should have never been taken from you in the first place. And Emily's journey reminds us of something equally important. Trust is not blind. Love is not control. And strength is not found in never making mistakes, but in having the courage to face them, learn from them, and choose differently. If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or quietly pushed aside in your own family, you are not alone, and you are not powerless. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step away long enough to see the truth. And when you do, you might just find your way back, stronger than before. If this story resonated with you, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment where you had to choose between staying and walking away? Share your story in the comments. And tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe in stories that remind us of our strength, because sometimes the quietest decisions change everything.